Just a heads up before we get into today's video. Go and support the author and check out his YouTube channel, Black Volumes. It'll be linked below in the description. Well, they used to be people. My name is Danica Craven and I've been an archaeologist for the past decade. Tantalizing opportunities often fall into my lap. Some drenched relic washes up on an Egyptian beach, or a lonesome fossil is uncovered, but I'm often beaten to the punch. That's the nature of the game, and as the years go by, fewer ancient gems remain undiscovered. Consequently, last December I was dumbfounded by a lead in the Bavarian Alps, and I arrived first, and that was not a gift worth squandering. My team and I investigated a frosty nook near Zugspitze, Germany's mightiest mountain. 2 days earlier, in the wake of a fearsome blizzard, a misshapen steel panel was found in the snow, halfway up a steep cliffside. Amir Langton and I had suspicions regarding its origin. Suspicions confirmed when our team unearthed something at the site. Concrete. "I told you," I gloated. "Oh, I know you did," Amir laughed. "But temper your expectations, Danny. We still don't know what we found." And an hour later, there came the satisfying clunk of metal against metal. Enzo Flores, our chief digger, had uncovered a lofty metallic door. Depleted by a day's work, he finally let his shovel fall into the snow. We followed suit, dropping our tools. Though I had been digging significantly slower than the burly laborers, I still felt a sense of achievement. A smile broadened across my cheeks. "Unbelievable," Amir whispered. "You love that word, don't you?" I smiled. "Even when we get inside and see undeniable proof, you'll still call me delusional." "Well, that's the thing," Amir said, scratching his neck. "How will we get in there?" "Not with this measly equipment," Enzo said. "We'll need something heavy-duty to breach the door." The man, a hulking figure with rosy frosted cheeks, led us out of the snow tunnel. "Explosives," Ansel Becker suggested. "Oh, calm down, kid. A hydraulic system should do the trick," Enzo replied. "But we aren't opening it tonight. Snow's coming down and daylight's gone. Everybody's cold and tired." I huffed. "But we—" "Not tonight, Miss Craven," Enzo insisted. "Amir?" I said, turning to my friend for assistance. My colleague shrugged. "Sorry, Danica, we won't be able to do anything without Enzo and his men." "But this is an undiscovered German stronghold," I said. "In 24 hours, we won't be the only people here. You know that local will already have told everybody about the panel he found." "We're gonna pack up and head to town," Enzo said firmly. "See you in the morning." An idea came to me. "Amir, let's camp here. Guard the tunnel, stake a claim. This is our site and I don't want anybody to take it." "I would strongly advise against that, Miss Craven," Enzo cautioned, rubbing a gloved hand against his red brow. "Other than tourists in the igloo resort, nobody sleeps on the mountain. Wild camping isn't safe." "I'll leave a tent for us, we'll be fine," I promised. "Amir, are you happy to stay with me?" My partner nodded. "Sure, Danny, this is our site. I don't want to lose it either." Enzo growled, barging past us and beginning to pack his equipment. "We do appreciate your help, Enzo," I said. "You don't need to appreciate it. I don't get paid to be appreciated. And I sure as heck don't get paid to babysit." And with that, Enzo Flores and his man began walking down the mountainous slope, heading towards the warm embrace of lights in the town below. "I'm sorry, Amir," I said as we tucked ourselves into our sleeping bags. He shrugged, smiling. "I respect you, Danica. You're more dedicated to this line of work than anyone that I know. You deserve this find, so let's guard it." "Oh, I'm being paranoid," I sighed. "No doubt about that," Amir chuckled. But it doesn't hurt to be safe, does it? We would kick ourselves if somebody were to invade our freshly dug site. We've done the hard work. I smirked. I mean, it was mostly done by Enzo. No, it was mostly done by Enzo. Amir agreed and we laughed. Thanks, I said. You're always so level-headed. It's a talent of mine, he grinned. As I dozed off, I had never felt safer in my life. Wrapped in a snug cotton cocoon, I was soothed by shrieking gusts and the rippling tent fabric. Our camp blocked the entrance to the snow tunnel, guarding the gateway to Hitler's last uncharted shelter. It was the jewel of my career, my life. That cozy feeling of accomplishment didn't last, however. Amir and I were awoken by a husky bellow in the early hours of the morning. What was that? My friend panted, sitting upright. I don't know, I breathlessly replied, rubbing my eyes. It sounded... I was interrupted by the sound of snow crunching beneath immense weight. It must be an animal, Amir whispered. What animal would be caught in this blizzard? I asked. And it wasn't a person. Neither of us contested that. The footsteps were too thunderous. Though our bodily instincts should have kept us inside, our intrigued minds got the better of us. Mother always said that curiosity would be the death of me. Amir cleared his throat. Do you? Yes, I answered before he finished his question. My colleague grinned, equally eager to explore, and he cautiously opened the zip to the tent. We peeked outside, squinting to see through the incessant downpour of white snow. Near the rim of our campsite, illuminated by the tall spotlight that Enzo had left behind, deep cracks led through the snow. Something had skirted around the edge of the site, and for a haunting second beyond the spotlight, I saw a black shape flit out of view, a towering figure concealed by torrential snowfall. Did you see that? I cried. No, Amir replied, frowning. What was it? I don't know, I said. It didn't look like an animal. Well, no person made those tracks, he said, nodding at the enormous footprints. It had to be I don't know, what time is it? I checked my watch. Nearly 4 a.m. Enzo and the others should be here in a few hours. My friend nodded. Let's go back to sleep, we'll stay quiet. If an animal were planning to attack us, it already would have done so. Yeah, I suppose so, but I've been thinking about something, I said. What's that? Amir asked. I paused, nodding at the archaeological find beside my sleeping bag. The steel panel is crumpled and battered. Why? They had a nasty storm up here, he said. Bad weather's pretty common in these parts. This German fortress is buried beneath an ocean of snow. It's built into the mountain. A storm didn't dislodge the panel, Amir, I said. We might not be the first people to find the bunker. You need to stop worrying about that, my colleague scoffed. Nobody's beaten us, it's our site. We should find out though, I said, slipping into my gear. I certainly won't be able to sleep now. Amir groaned before nodding and getting dressed. Torches at the ready, we left the tent and entered the darkness. No hope of sunlight to guide us, and I knew Amir was right. We should have waited. But I had been doing that for years, and it had cost me so many opportunities. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Living was more important than surviving. Do you still think it might have been a panel of ventilation slats? I asked. Amir nodded. It's incredibly misshapen, but it does have that vague shape. So we should try to find the ventilation system, I said. Of course, but this bunker might be humongous. How would we find the vent? You're not seriously planning on doing more digging at this hour, are you? He asked. The panel is already broken free. The digging has been done for us, I said. Bear in mind that 48 hours of fresh snowfall might have covered whatever was uncovered, Amir noted. I know. 30 yards to the side of the tent there stood a flag. It marked the spot at which the panel had been found, our starting point for the excavation. The small pole and its flapping nylon were both wearing thick and snowy blankets. "What are you hoping to find?" Amir asked. "Thinking about it," I said. "A ventilation system missing a panel. That might provide another access point to the bunker." "Wait," Amir said, pointing at the protruding rock face 30 yards up the slope. "You see that?" I squinted through the snowfall and saw what my colleague had spotted. Streaks of red dyed the snow across the limestone face. I shuddered. "Is that blood?" Amir coldly finished. "I was wrong about that animal. It isn't harmless. We need to get out of here." I shook my head. "I won't stop now." "Oh, don't be stupid, Danica," Amir said. "You're not going to follow that trail." But I had already started wading through the snow, using my torch once I had passed beyond the reach of the spotlight. "You know I'm going to have to follow you," he said, trudging after me. "Please head back. I just need to see this place before anybody else, Amir. But I don't want you to come with me. You've already done enough to help." Of course, my colleague ignored that, and we walked together and battling against the willful breeze. The bloody trail continued for 100 yards, painting a foreboding wave across the snow-covered rock face. It eventually stopped at a hole in the wall, a cavernous entry point of twisted metal. I was right. This structure is bigger than we ever imagined. "I don't know how I feel about this," Amir said. "We should wait for Enzo and the others. It'll be daytime when they arrive. We'll all go alone. I feel guilty enough for asking you to camp on this freezing mountain." "Don't be silly. I made the decision to stay. This matters to me too, Danny. However, if somebody has removed that ventilation panel..." Amir paused, sighing. "We've already been beaten to this discovery. Danica, it's over, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "The metal is bending towards us, Amir. The panel was removed from inside the vent." I shone my torch's light into the blackened pit, revealing a rusted ventilation shaft. A metal tunnel with twists and turns. I stepped inside, surprised by the height and width of the vent. I was crouching slightly, but it was still a broad passageway. "Danny, please," Amir begged, grabbing my arm. "Don't do this. The blood is..." "Something's in there," I interrupted, gently removing his hand. "Go back to the tent, Amir, and call Enzo. I'll join you in half an hour or so. I'm just going to take a look. This is the biggest discovery in archaeological history." Amir did not turn around, however. Our boots squelched in the snowy entrance, and then came the squelch of whatever maroon-colored gunk lay at our feet. Blood mixed with something. "Oh, that stench is unbearable," Amir winced, his voice echoing around the ceaseless metal chamber. "At least it masks your body odor," I quipped. "Oh." My feet stopped a few centimeters from a gaping hole in the floor of the vent, a hole which would have claimed me if I had taken another step. When Amir and I pointed our torches at the opening, we saw a small bedroom below, the quarters of ancient soldiers. Inside, there were 2 bunk beds, marriages of rotting wood and maggot-ridden mattresses. The horror of the discovery finally filled my bones, paralyzing my spine. I understood that something was very wrong with the place, and Amir saw that in my stiff, unmoving body. "All right, you've seen it, Danica. We should head back now," he pleaded. "This isn't right." "No animal made that hole," I said. "No human." "Well, even less of a reason to go down there then," Amir insisted. "We need to leave before we find whatever you saw." "I'll go down. I'm just going to look at the first room, and then we'll head back to camp. You stay up here," I said, before sitting down and dangling my legs into the hole. "I'm not helping you," he said. "Well, it's going to hurt when I hit the floor then," I shrugged. My colleague sighed, realizing that I wasn't bluffing, and he placed his torch on the floor. And then he held my arms tightly as I gingerly slid over the edge of the hole. I felt like a child daring to dip a toe out of her duvet, in spite of the monsters beneath the bed. I placed one foot on the top bunk and lowered my second leg delicately. I nodded at Amir and he released me. I screamed as the mattress and supporting wooden planks collapsed under my weight. "Danny!" Amir cried. My friend collected his torch and swiftly jumped into the hole, landing in the room with a resounding thunk. As I hazily sat upright, lost in a festering mound of rotten wood and filthy cotton, I noticed Amir hobbling towards me. "Are you okay?" he grimaced, helping me to my feet. "Yeah, thank you," I said. "Are you?" "I might have twisted my ankle," my friend said. I sucked my teeth. "Oh, I'm sorry, Amir, you were right. It was way too dangerous. Come on, let's get you back to camp." He shook his head. "I'm strong enough to lift you up, but you're not going to be able to lift me, no offense." "But you need help. What if you've broken something?" I asked. "There's not a lot that could be done now," Amir shrugged. "This is why I said we should have waited until the morning." "I know," I said, hugging the man tightly. "I'm sorry, have I mentioned that?" "Yeah, but not enough times," he smiled, wincing. "Still, you were right too. This place is real, and it's unbelievable." "Are you going to keep saying that?" I chuckled. "Take the win," he said. "Okay, I told you so." "Are you going to keep saying that?" he asked, grinning. For a moment, we forgot about the sounds that we had heard on the mountain, the blood and the snow, the black shape that I had seen in the distance. None of those things mattered. Amir and I were explorers again, blinded danger, jubilant about our astounding discovery. "Right, let's get you back into the vent," Amir said. "Fetch Enzo and he'll be able to lift me up. The man's built like Popeye." "1 second, look at this," I said. On a small cabinet at the end of the demolished bunk bed, there sat a dusty, leather-bound book. I blew off the cobwebs and flicked away a persistent spider. The diary was written in German, of course, but I'm fluent. "The Diary of Conrad Vogel," I translated. "That's great, Danny," Amir said. "Now come over here so I can lift you up." "Okay," I nodded, pocketing the journal. "I'll phone Enzo and we'll get you out of here." "He's going to be pissed," my colleague warned, preparing his hands to lift me. I shrugged, climbing onto Amir's sturdy palms. "He's always pissed." "Sure, but this time, however, he'll be royally pissed." The man grunted, raising me through the hole. "Everything's gonna be fine," I said, climbing into the ventilation shaft. "I'll hurry up, don't go anywhere." "Funny," Amir said. "Oh, don't mind me, I'll just have a nap on this crusty mattress." I hurried through the vent and returned to the blizzard, which felt merciless after being sheltered by a castle of steel and concrete. I fought against the elements, hurriedly scurrying back to the campsite. Once inside the tent, I immediately used the satellite phone to contact Enzo. My mobile wasn't receiving any signal. "It's 4:30 in the morning," the man answered. "Why have you woken me up, Miss Craven?" I took a deep breath, preparing for a lecture. "Amir and I found something." "What do you mean?" "We heard something outside and then we found a trail of blood." "There shouldn't be any wild animals on the mountain, certainly not in this weather. Did you see anybody? Somebody might be hurt." "It wasn't a wild animal or a person, Mr. Flores. The blood led to the bunker's ventilation shaft, and we went inside." "You? Without supervision, you explored an uncharted, century-old building at night. Is that what you mean to tell me?" "Well, we had a little accident." "What happened, Miss Craven?" "Amir had injured his ankle," I whispered timidly. "What? Where is he now?" "In the bunker. I came back to the campsite to ask you for help. We have to get him out of there. Stay where you are. Do not go anywhere without us. The phone fell silent and I had nothing to do but sit and wait. It would take an hour for Enzo to reach me at the very least, and I didn't want to cause any more problems. But then I excitedly remembered what lay in my coat. I scooped the diary of Conrad Vogel out of my pocket. January 2nd, 1948. It's been nearly 3 years since we won the war. Commander Meyer, however, insists that the surface remains unsafe. The Fuhrer has claimed the world, but roaches remain. A resistance that seeks to squash us. Bavaria is at war. That is why we must remain hidden until German forces have come to save us. Hidden in the Tallerberg. Our Fuhrer's mightiest stronghold. I have doubts, but I will never voice them aloud. Even writing such things will put my life at risk, but I must pen my thoughts. I'm losing my mind. I cannot bottle up these feelings any longer. Corporal Fisher died today. While clearing his room, I found this empty journal in his belongings. Strange that he would never use it. It's a sign. God longs for me to do something more than fester in this place. So let me get this off my chest. There are two possible truths. Either the war hasn't ended or we have lost. But if we have not won, why would we still be hiding? February 27th, 1948. It's harder to keep up with a diary than I thought. Even with nothing to do, the mind wanders. It wanders to strange places. One of the crop rooms failed last week, I don't know why. Tallerberg is full of advanced technology, things beyond my understanding. There are dozens of crop rooms, of course, and we'll be okay. I don't really care as long as I get fed. But I feel the nearing tide of dissent. People are angry and afraid, and it's not good to be with scared folk in a cage. Yes, we have an abundance of food, but how long are we going to stay down here? What happens when more crop rooms fail? At some point, we won't have enough to feed everybody. I vote that we stop feeding the prisoners. I don't share the ideals of our Fuhrer, though it is treason to say so. Nonetheless, I hate the British and the French. Let them starve. Commander Meyer told us the crop rooms wouldn't fail. He told us that this fortress would stand for 1,000 years. So many lies. March 12th, 1948. Another crop room has been abandoned. That's 2 in 2 months. Nobody's going hungry yet, but the murmuring is getting louder. I don't like the thought of an underground mutiny. There's not much else to report. Charlotte and I have been meeting in my room when my bunkmates are away. She's a terrible nurse, but an excellent lover. August 15th, 1948. Some privates left at Tallerberg yesterday. Cowards. I do not believe in the Fuhrer's cause, but I know that I love my country. I will never leave the Tallerberg. I will never betray Germany. December 25th, 1948. This is the first Christmas I've celebrated in 10 years. Commander Meyer senses the furious sentiment of the people. To quell our dangerous thoughts, he has allowed us to honor our Christian traditions. The Fuhrer would not approve, but he isn't here, is he? I suspect that he might be dead. June 21st, 1951. I forgot about this old journal. Life intervened, death intervened. More crop rooms failed over the past 3 years, and as I predicted, rations have commenced. So much for Tallerberg lasting 1,000 years. Many soldiers have rioted and faced execution, and became martyrs for future revolutions, perpetuating an endless cycle of death, riot, die, riot, die. We despise the prisoners, more mouths to feed enemy mouths. But Commander Meyer tells us that a prisoner equals power. Why do we need hostages? To me, that is not the statement of a winning side, but I've known that for years. The war is over. We lost. December 1st, 1951. The men are falling sick, the women too, though they have been prioritized. The starving are the sickest. Fortunately, we have begun to prioritize Germans when it comes to food. Most of the prisoners are ill and they're malnourished and living in dire conditions. It seems Commander Meyer finally values self-preservation over power. However, he's starting to lose his grip. March 12, 1952. Dr. Klein says that many of the sick are infected with tuberculosis, the White Death, an old disease. In the years before coming to Tallerberg, I remember hearing talk of a potential cure for the affliction. Though such a thing may exist, it doesn't exist down here, and the sick are only getting sicker. We are trapped in a tin can. March 30th, 1952. The ill have been confined to the West Quarter, the Armory. There is one section for German patients and a separate section for prisoners. We will quarantine them until they die. They have been left with adequate provisions. All I keep thinking is that there will be fewer mouths to feed, and I'm glad. July 10th, 1954. Much has changed in 2 years. I found this book while clearing my bunkmate's belongings. I stashed it under his mattress. He would never think to look there. Not that it matters now, his name was Bertram, and he caught the White Death. No matter how many times we quarantine the sick, the disease always returns. Dr. Klein has been conducting tests, trying to find a cure. He grows tired of begging Commander Meyer to abandon Tallerberg. Like me, he knows that there's no war, he knows that we lost. But he wouldn't dare leave this place of his own accord. I don't think anybody really leaves. November 2nd, 1955. I have a reason to unearth this diary once more. Charlotte has given birth to our child, one of only 20 children born in the 14 years that we've spent in this bunker. I have named him Fritz Vogel. I fear for the boy's life. I don't want him to become a soldier. I don't want him to live in this place. I pray that Commander Meyer succumbs to old age in the near future. He seems to be the last thread holding this place together. After him, we may even leave. Few people still believe in the cause of the fewer. November 16th, 1956. Each year passes in the blink of an eye. One might expect time to drag in such a place, but no time does not exist here. Fritz is the only thing keeping Charlotte and me going, but we are lucky we have more than most, and for that we're grateful. Our population dwindles. 10 years ago, there were 1,000 of us in this underground city. 600 people remain. The White Death ebbs and flows. Whenever we think that it has disappeared, it claims another dozen lives or so. But Dr. Klein promises that he is close to a solution. He conducts tests only on the prisoners. That is what he says anyway. I only fear that his experiments continue to put us all at risk. We shouldn't be keeping the sick alive, put bullets in their heads and eliminate the risk. Doctors think too much. Life isn't that complicated. Klein will kill us all. May 7th, 1961. It seems that I uncovered this journal at milestones in my life, and this will be my final one. The White Death has finally caught me. I have requested a bullet tonight. When I'm gone, I wish to be cremated. I don't want to be another one of Klein's experiments. I don't trust that he only experiments on the prisoners. The aged man has claimed for the past 7 years to be on the verge of a breakthrough, but all I see is a pile of bodies. He's a liar. I only hope that I haven't given this terrible disease to Charlotte or Fritz. I am not a good man, but they are pure people. Charlotte is a woman of conviction. She doesn't want to be here. She cares only for healing people, as terrible as she may be at doing so. And Fritz is a gentle soul. He doesn't deserve this life. I pray this place does not eat him alive in my absence. Shuddering at the German soldier's last entry, I turned the page to find something unexpected. The Diary of Fritz Vogel, October 27th, 1973. My name is Fritz, and I don't know whether anybody will ever read my father's diary. They will likely never read my logs either. I found his journal while packing my things. I'm moving to a new room in the south wing. Mother is sad to see me go, and I'm scared of the future. But I'm 18 now, and I knew this day would come. Commander Myers still insists that all men become soldiers, all women become nurses or teachers. It has been that way for 30 years. This life seems meaningless to me. So few of us remain, and I found it baffling to read my father's account of this place. Stranger still to imagine a world outside of Tallerberg. He talked of 1,000 people living in this bunker. Well, 3 decades later, there are 500 of us. The White Death lingers, but it's not the threat that it used to be. Of course, we lose people every year, and there aren't many children. There aren't many people left to have children. September 8th, 1974. I only remember this book when my feelings are bubbling over. My father was right. Writing is the only thing that extinguishes the insanity. I've been working with Cuckoo Klein in the laboratory. That's what my friends call him, but he doesn't seem that bad to me. Perhaps I focused too much on my father's journal entries. He talked of a determined, intelligent doctor. That being said, the old man I see is admittedly a little lost. I have been told he still experiments on the prisoners in the abandoned West Wing, but that's nonsense. They all died long ago. As Commander Myers said, the war is over. There's no need to waste precious resources on the enemy. Myers is a very different man from the one that Father described. He's getting old too. February 16th, 1975. I was excited to work in the lab. It sounded better than doing other soldierly duties. Patrolling corridors, guarding the old armory, cleaning toilets. But I'm starting to agree with my friends. Dr. Klein may be crazy. He makes me uncomfortable saying peculiar things. You are sick, but I keep you healthy. Lena told me that he often says that same thing to her. She keeps me from losing my head. December 2nd, 1976. Mother passed. She caught the White Death. Dr. Klein said that the old ones don't have what it takes to beat the sickness, not like the young blood, the post-war babies. I've asked the commander to assign me to a different department. It took all of my willpower not to thump the doctor in the face for his callous comment about my mother. November 19th, 1989. 13 years had passed, a lifetime in many ways, but life is just as grueling as I remember. Still, it seemed fitting to return to this diary at a momentous juncture of my life. Much has changed in Tallerberg. I am Colonel Fritz Vogel, and I work as Commander Braun's right-hand man. Not that we have many people left to lead. 100 men, women, and children live in Tallerberg. Father often talked of revolutions and escapees, but we do not fear that. All survivors are either too old to leave or too young to know any other life. Braun and I have discussed it before leaving this place, but what lies beyond the fortress? A world that doesn't belong to the Fuhrer. He is dead. That is what Commander Meyer finally admitted on his deathbed. A secret that we must keep. I have not even told my wife, Lena. We had lost the war in 1945, 10 years before I was even born, and this stronghold is the home of the Fuhrer's last men and women. The commander was a selfish man. When he had learned that Germany had lost the war, he told nobody in Tallerberg. He continued the lie, told folk to remain strong and patient. After all, this castle was built to last. Indoor crop fields, water drawn from the snow on the mountain, and 1,000 other advanced machines that made this the perfect haven. A home for a millennium. The commander told us that we were finally free to leave, and he wouldn't stop us. But where would we go? This is the only home the children have ever known. If we were to step foot into the outside world, it would reject us. And that is not the only secret Commander Meyer revealed. The prisoners and their descendants are still alive in the armory. For 35 years, Dr. Klein has been conducting experiments on them. The rumors were true. He's still trying to cure the White Death, and though he has not succeeded, he has developed a treatment that he has been giving to children for decades. That's why we haven't been getting sick. He gives every newborn baby a temporary vaccine, and then he slips treatments into our food. It doesn't work on the old. Something about the vaccine flourishing in young bodies. And Dr. Klein must be the luckiest man on earth to have worked so closely with infected patients for nearly 4 decades without becoming sick himself. The man has to be into his 80s. August 31st, 1992. Lena and I have just welcomed our baby girl into the world, Ella, the 3rd generation of the Vogel family to live in this doomed place. That is nothing short of a miracle in these times. There are 72 survivors. Most of the old guard has perished. However, against all odds, Dr. Klein persists. He is the oldest man in the bunker by a country mile. I imagine he has a picture of Dorian Gray stashed somewhere in his room. April 5th, 1995. You must see my work. The doctor said that to me today. He's been trying to show me the armory in the West Wing for years and I've refused. 2 months ago, Commander Braun saw something in there. Something that made him unwell in the head and he took his life. We have no commander now. I don't want to face the same fate. Klein has told me more than I wanted to hear. It's horrible enough to know that those poor prisoners are still alive. Prisoners of a war that ended 50 years ago. Soldiers and civilians. The old and their children and their grandchildren. Lena and I don't believe in any of this. We don't believe in the things that the Fuhrer had said. The idea of a perfect race, what does that even mean? I don't want to know what things our leader did. But based on stories from the old folk, we were on the wrong side of history. They don't believe that, of course. There are fewer people to keep things running, fewer people who know how to fix machinery and grow crops. After Commander Braun died, I disbanded the patrols. I mean, why bother? This is no army. It's a group of scared people hiding underground, too afraid of the world lying behind the door. And worst of all, the White Death has returned. December 21st, 1996. I finally succumbed to the doctor's demands and I joined him in the quarantine zone, the old armory. Over the past year, old age and the White Death have killed every member of the original bunker dwellers other than Dr. Klein. There are roughly 50 people living in this hole and most survivors are under the age of 40. None of us know of the world before the bunker. None of us know of the world beyond the bunker. The end is near, and I've accepted that. Before dying, I had to know what the doctor was doing, and it was far worse than anything I could have possibly imagined. None of the original prisoners remain. These surviving inmates are the children and grandchildren of the English and French captives. They have known no life beyond the West Wing, beyond their cages in the armory. The German ward of the armory is empty, no sick have survived in there. But that wasn't what horrified me the most. In the prison ward, Klein introduced me to cages of children. They were bloated beyond breaking point, gargantuan, bulging people. Not just their bellies, but their limbs and faces. Their skin was black and green, swollen as if their entire bodies had developed gangrene. The doctor ignored my disturbed reaction and he began to taunt the children, spitting in their cages, calling them vile and sickening names, telling them that God had punished them for their sins, the very sin of being born with regard to the Jewish prisoners. My father was a man of God, and that didn't sound right to me. The children said nothing in response. They surveyed us with agonized, glassy eyes that seemed to beg for death. And that was when I snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I drew my father's ancient revolver and unloaded all 6 rounds into the doctor's back. He did not die immediately, not like any other man. But then Dr. Klein was not really a man. Who knows what experiments he conducted to prolong his life? And as I stood over the doctor, who smiled with the blood pooling in his gums, he told me a terrible secret. Klein found the cure for the White Death before I was even born. A cure that he administered to the young folk before we were born. Not a temporary vaccine as Meyer believed, but a cure. But the side effects could be seen in the cages. Blackened skin, inflated bodies, inhuman eyes. Dr. Klein told me that he found a way to stop the disease from killing us by binding our minds with the bacteria, fusing the host and the bacteria into a singular entity. The body keeps the disease alive and the disease keeps the body alive. But that is no cure. What happened to those children is obscene. Klein had been putting treatments in our food not to treat the disease, but to stop the cure from turning us into monsters. And as he died at my feet, I realized something terrible. Without him, there would be no more treatments. I turned the page to find nothing but manic scribbles that continued throughout the remainder of the book. The occasional word or phrase was legible. Warm, warm, eat heat, eat water. And then my heart raced as I remembered the dark shape that I had seen outside the tent, the looming shadow with large footsteps. Clearly one or more of the Tallerberg residents had survived. Amir, I whispered fearfully. Enzo Flores arrived with Anselm Becker close to 6 in the morning. The snowfall showed no sign of easing, and neither did the temper of the lead workman. I heard him long before I saw him. The man began to roar over the wind, and I unzipped the tent to see 2 figures beneath the harsh glow of the spotlight. "Where is he?" Enzo shouted. "I'll show you," I meekly responded, stumbling out of the tent. We hurried up the mountain, following the bloody trail along the rock face. It had mostly been covered by fresh snow, and I moved quickly, afraid of Enzo catching up to me and giving me a proper scolding. When we had reached the vent's torn entrance, I realized that I hadn't told Mr. Flores of the horrifying revelations that I found in the diary. That was decades ago. There's nobody other than Amir down there. I fearfully and unconvincingly told my rapid heartbeat. "What were you thinking?" The lead laborer screamed over the weather. "I asked him not to follow me," I croakily replied. "And how would that be better?" Enzo asked. "You would have been the one stuck down there, and he wouldn't even know." "It's done now," Anselm softly said, attempting to diffuse the tension. "Well, not until we found him." Enzo huffed, charging into the entrance. I followed our disgruntled leader into the metal tunnel, and his timid worker joined him. After a minute of navigating the winding passageway, we arrived at the hole above the bedroom. "He's in there," I said as Enzo shone his light into the room. "We're back, Amir." There was no response, and before I had even blinked, Enzo jumped through the hole in the vent. He landed on the floor with a feline nimbleness, causing Anselm and I to widen our eyes in shock. "He's not here. Is this the wrong room, Miss Craven?" "What?" I asked, peering into the hole. "No, there's the bed that broke when. This is the room, Mr. Flores." My heartbeat quickened again. Words from the journal sounded in my brain, overlapping in the jarring cacophony. I thought of the underground society in ruins, thought of Fritz Vogel. I wondered what had happened to him and the other inhabitants after the Colonel's final discernible entry in 1996. That was nearly 30 years ago, I reminded myself again. They're all dead now." "Well, he's left," Enzo angrily pointed out. "Did he fancy a stroll, eh?" "I don't know," I whispered. "And the door's open. Was it open when you were in here?" "I don't remember. Maybe. No, it wasn't." "Right, so he's in this place somewhere. Do you have any idea of the dangers that might lurk down here?" Enzo barked. I stammered. "I'll pay you more for—" "Pay me more?" The man brayed hysterically. "Are you joking? There is no amount of money that covers this. This bunker is nearly a century old. It's falling apart at the seams. Exploring it will kill us. Is that what my life was worth to you, Miss Craven? A few extra pounds?" "You need to breathe, Enzo," Anselm said. "We're coming down and—" "Well, of course you're coming down," he spat. "How do you expect me to live with Amir's death on my conscience? We have to find him." Enzo lifted his broad arms and motioned with his hands. "Jump," he bluntly ordered. "I think you and I should do this alone," Anselm stated. "No, she's coming with us," Enzo said. I didn't argue. I slid my legs over the edge and fell into the laborer's grip. He roughly handled my waist as if meaning to hurt me, and then he delicately helped Anselm down. Moving my flashlight around, nothing in the deserted bedroom looked different, other than the open door. There were no signs left by Amir, none that I noticed anyway. "Lead the way, Miss Craven," Enzo said, nodding at the door. I gulped, terrified by the fact that the torch's light seemed to do nothing to permeate the thick sea of blackness beyond the open doorway. And when I left the safe confines of Fritz's room, I found myself standing in a forgotten hallway lined with an endless sea of doors. I looked back at the bedroom door, room 421. I committed that to my memory. "How do we find him?" I asked. "I have no idea, Miss Craven," Enzo sighed. "I'm a laborer, not a search and rescue specialist. I was expecting to find a man with a twisted ankle in that room, a simple in-and-out job." "Perhaps we should head down the mountain," Anselm said. "Find some proper help." Before Enzo or I acknowledged Anselm's wise comment, a distant sound of pain filled the corridor, either groaning metal or a groaning voice. "Craven, you said you saw something," Enzo whispered. "What exactly did you see?" I gulped, my mind breaking. No, it isn't, I don't." A reverberating scream tunneled down the hallway, pinging off the walls. It sent a ripple of shivers down my spine. It was Amir. "I appreciate the suggestion, Anselm, but we're not turning around now," Enzo said, lifting the torch. "It came from this direction." "You're not serious," his worker said. "I didn't sign up for this. You told me that we were lifting a guy out of a hole, but this is insane. I mean, what was that sound?" "It was Amir," I whimpered. "No," Anselm said, shaking his head. "Before that, you know what I mean." I did, but I didn't want to think about what had made that demonic noise. "I want to know what destroyed the ventilation shaft," Enzo said. "Nothing's coming to mind, Miss Craven, and your face is growing paler by the second. I'll ask one more time, what did you see?" "I'm not afraid of what I saw," I whispered, pulling the diary out of my pocket. "I'm afraid of what I read." Enzo eyed me frightfully as if reading the secrets of the journal in my petrified gaze. "I don't want to know, do I?" he whispered knowingly. "Let's just find Mr. Langton and leave this place." Anselm uttered a sound of protest, but Enzo had already begun to walk down the hallway, leading us towards the source of the groaning. "Holy," Enzo gasped, stopping suddenly. I didn't have to ask. My eyes were drawn to the spot on the floor that he was illuminating. A threadbare soldier's uniform was lying in a mound of dust, the final resting place of some poor, decayed soul. And as we continued along the corridor, we saw others, Through open doorways, we saw uniforms on beds, victims of the White Death, or something worse. I thought of Fritz's final entry, the revelation that Dr. Klein had cured the new generation of Tylerberg. But what had they become? Canteen, Enzo said, reading a sign. I assume that means canteen. I nodded, and our leader led us down the corridor that the sign was pointing towards. I felt unsettled about leaving the main hallway. I only hoped that we would be able to find our way back to room 421. Lord above us, save us, Enzo cried, illuminating the deserted dining area. It was filled with long tables and several uniforms of decayed soldiers laying on the benches. Citizens, I should say. In the end, there were no soldiers, only the malformed children of Germans and prisoners. There are fresh footprints in the dust, Enzo said, pointing at the floor. Mr. Langton isn't here, but he's close by. Anselm noted the exit at the far side of the canteen. That way. We headed out of the expansive room, and I quaked as we passed dozens of empty uniforms. Only the clothes weren't empty. The ashy remains of dead bunker dwellers sat within the mounds of attire left behind. But my greater fear lay beyond the eating area. The canteen exited onto another hallway, and Enzo pointed at a long-faded board on the wall. Waffenkammer, he said. The arrow points left. What does that word mean, Miss Craven? I choked tearfully. Armory. Well, the dust trail leads that way, so... No, I interrupted, shaking my head. Not there, we have to leave this place. What? We're not leaving Mr. Langton behind. I don't want to leave him, but I don't want anybody else to. What? Flores pressed. Spit it out, Craven. I know you're keeping something from me. Another unearthly wail sounded from the end of the corridor. There were no doors along the hallway, only one at the end. The entrance to the West Wing. The armory. A prison for the souls cursed with the White Death. Enzo and Anselm began walking down the corridor, and my knocking knees slowed my pace as I unwillingly followed them. The two men had no idea what lay in wait. They only wanted the whole ordeal to end. It would, soon enough. When we had reached the door labeled Waffenkammer, we realized it wasn't much of a door at all. It had been torn in half, and planks of festering wood lay on the floor. A pit of darkness lurked beyond the half-demolished door, and it swung open with a tender push. We entered a narrow walkway lined with metal cages. Each barred section housed abandoned boxes of ammunition, and ancient rifles were attached to the walls. There were worn mattresses and more crumpled uniforms on the floors of the cages. This had been the first ward of the quarantine zone, the German ward. There came another sound, but quieter this time. The pitiful cry of a pained dog. Breathy crying, labored crying. Something's in here, Anselm wailed, his voice bouncing off the walls of the confined corridor. His utterance deadened the crying. A shadow danced along the wall, a shape just beyond the glow of Enzo's light. There was a moment of stillness, no movement or sound. The false calmness at the eye of a storm. And then a moan sounded from the ceiling, followed by a thump. Something had landed between us and the door. We turned to face whatever had trapped us in the armory. Darkness approached. A colossal being darted towards us, a humanoid of such enormity that it could not fit comfortably between the cages of ammunition. Its decaying flesh puckered and creased as it squished its horrible, portly form through the narrow corridor. It was an abomination that should never have walked the surface of Earth. Fritz's final entry did not do the thing justice. Its infected skin oozed darkened sludge and pus. Its eyes were gray, bulbous, and unseeing spears. But it sensed us. The creature swiped at my screeching face, tearing into my flesh, and I braced for what I hoped would be a swift death. However, Enzo Flores stepped between the beast and me. and he was in the creature's grasp before I had even blinked. The dreadful demon distended beyond natural limits. It was somehow holding itself together with rotting, diseased, stretch-marked flesh. "Run!" Enzo yelled, grappling with the thing that used to be a human. Anselm and I fled down the hallway, sobbing at the sounds of squelching and screaming, shredding flesh, crunching bones, that heavy, inhuman breathing. Anselm lit the way with his torch until we saw a door 50 yards ahead, just as the ominous sound ceased. We charged towards it, and the frightened laborer shoulder-barged the door with all of his might. After it burst open, we slipped inside, and a mighty shriek unleashed behind us, the battle cry of something neither living nor dead. "Shut it!" Anselm screamed. I hurriedly slammed the door and fiddled with the rusty lock until it clicked, and then I turned around to find myself facing the ward that matched the description that Fritz Vogel had given. A second line of cages, much like those in the first section of the armory, except the German ward had makeshift rooms, creature comforts, amenities. On the other hand, the quarters in the second hallway were shabby and revolting. Those cages clearly belonged to the prisoners. What exactly was written in that book? Anselm fearfully asked. I shook my head, still weeping. Enzo was right, you don't want to know. Anselm nodded shakily, and we walked along another hallway of ammunition cages that had been transformed into homes for the sick. Bland gray outfits, each bearing a prisoner's number, lay in piles within the cages. The bodies of captives and their children, kept imprisoned decades after the end of the war. A terrifying thought in itself. A thought only interrupted by an awful wheezing noise. Do you hear that? Anselm asked weakly. It sounds like breathing. I moaned in horror. I expected to see another ghoul lurking in the shadows at the end of the corridor, but I realized the sound was coming from my side. And then I cast my torch's light into one of the cages, a room with warped metal bars. Within the room, 2 uniformed prisoners were drenched in blood and dirt. The numbers were concealed by years of filth, and their clothes were ripping at the seams thanks to their bulging forms. Most dreadfully, they were glued together. Their flesh had joined like 2 rotten mounds of clay mushed into one direful entity. The 2 mouths of the entity opened in unison, revealing black, toothless chasms. Warm, they moaned together. Eat warmth. Horrified, I recalled the deranged scribbles of Fritz Vogel. He had said similar things. No, Anselm yelped, lighting a patch of floor beside the conjoined prisoners. I recognized the crumpled heap. 2 crumpled heaps. A mirror. His body had been violently divided at the waist, and his intestines tied the 2 separate halves together. I wailed, mind disintegrating as I eyeballed my friend's undignified corpse. I didn't want to imagine the horror and pain that he had endured in his final moments of life. And as I noted the chunks of flesh missing from his body, along with the fresh red on the lips of the conjoined prisoners, I understood the full, twisted truth. Eat warmth. A booming thud interrupted my thoughts. It's going to break through the door, Anselm whimpered. I was lost in a daze, but the laborer grabbed my shoulders and twisted me to face him. Danica, he said, I'll get you out of here when it passes your cage, run. I didn't respond. Tears painted my petrified face, but the man shoved my detached body into the open cage on the opposite side of the hallway. He switched my torch off and placed a finger to his lips. Moments later, the creature barreled into the ward of the prisoners. I was barely cognizant of Anselm running down the corridor of cages, moving towards the end of the room, but I realized what he was doing. Hey! He screamed at the creature waving his torch. It was over in seconds. The bulbous being, almost supernatural in essence, fired down the walkway passing me. It lunged towards the screaming laborer at the far end of the armory, and awful sounds followed. I slipped out of the cage, fleeing the scene without consciously processing what I was doing. Some primitive urge controlled my physical form, but I managed to twist my head, foolishly locking eyes with the horrible sight at the end of the room. The creature tore Anselm to pieces as if he were breaking bread. The worker didn't have time to utter a sound or make a move, but that isn't why my mouth gaped. The creature's bare back, colored black and green from disease, bore 6 bruised, circular wounds. It's not him, I told myself, stifling a scream. I ran faster than my legs should have been able to carry me, and I expected the once person to catch me before I made it to the canteen, let alone the bedroom. But it didn't pursue me. And when I finally returned to reality, I was standing in room 421, gazing up at the hole in the vent. I barely remember how I got there. I know that I waded through the muck of Enzo's half-devoured body, but that memory is a disjointed nightmare. There are blank spots in my mind, a protection mechanism perhaps. After heaving the remaining bunk beds under the vent, I hauled my body onto it. Thankfully, it didn't collapse under my weight and I managed to pull myself into the metal tunnel. Sobbing, reduced to a broken being, I stumbled through the winding system and finally reached a world dimly lit by the dawning sun. A red hue streaked the sky and the blizzard had quieted. Flecks of snow fell gently and the breeze blew quietly. The mountain felt unnaturally stiff, unaware of the horror that lay beneath its surface. I darted down the slope, eventually falling into the main road of the town below. I was a bawling, unintelligible heap. A local hotel receptionist quickly found me. He was disturbed by the sound of wailing in a town that was ordinarily so peaceful. I told everyone everything. I didn't care how crazy I sounded. They would see for themselves when they entered Tallerberg. And to an extent they did. After breaching the bunker door and exploring the facility, they found so much of what I described. The uniforms of fallen soldiers, the destroyed vent, the blood, even the remnants of my team. But no sign of the monsters. They had escaped. The psychiatrist still tells me that they never existed. After all, what remained of my team members had been found in a pile of rubble at the far end of the armory. A collapsed ceiling had killed them. That remains the official verdict. But I know better, I know what I saw. I have the diary of the Vogels. Most tellingly, I have the scar on my face, a scar that still hasn't healed. It worsens by the day. My blue pupils have been fading to gray, and there's a voice in my head that I don't recognize, one that hungers for something that I don't understand. Warmth.